Hey everyone, welcome to Katharine's Creatures. This is episode 54, and this is a series where we're going to discuss, touch base, and talk about various mythological beasts, beings, and the like, pulled from lore worldwide. And I always like to preface by saying that I am not a linguist, so I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anything. I know that most likely has been the case sometimes, but I do try my best. With that said, today I'm going to jump back to Greek mythology, and we're going to be talking about the Sirens. Now, Sirens, again, come from Greek mythos, and their name, the origin of their name, has some debate to it. Certain people kind of found similarities between the word siren and certain old Greek words that form a relation to the concepts of entangling or the entangler or binder, which work really well with sirens because they are supposed to be able to ensnare people by the sounds of their voices. And it also might be in a reference of this concept of being an entangler or binder because the first time they were written was in the Odyssey by Homer, and when Odysseus has to actually, or allows himself to be bound or tied to the mast of a ship so he could be the only person alive to actually listen to the sound of the sirens and not go crazy and jump over the side of the ship and drown themselves as they swim toward the sirens, which is kind of how their predation goes. But I'll get to that a little bit more in just a moment. But sirens have evolved over time in the sense of what they look like and how they act. In mythos, they kind of originated as bird people, and almost to the point of like medieval era, they kind of became the word siren became almost interchangeable with the concept of the mermaid. So they did evolve themselves, and their mythos has changed over the years. But as I kind of mentioned a little bit before, the first time they were written about was in Homer's Odyssey. And though he never actually describes what the sirens are, he did say that there were two of them, though never named them, and kind of left it open to like the listener, because it was an oral translation of a orally told story, up to the listener on to develop what they thought the sirens might look like. And there are plenty of monsters in Greek mythos to inspire some kind of creep factor or terror without even needing to describe the sirens. You know, you could think of any of the others in Greco-Roman mythology, and I'm sure they had plenty of kind of horrific concepts to choose from. Now, as things go, the siren evolved, and the next person, I think, to note the word or the name, the concept of the siren was, let me see if I can pronounce his name. Here we go. Apollonius, there we go, of Rhodes. And this was in his work, Ardonautica, which is Jason and the Argonauts, if you are familiar with some Greek myths. But he was the second time to kind of talk about the sirens. And in his work, he described them as part woman and part bird, but left it kind of like that. Now, if you kind of think back on Greek society, they did have contact with ancient Egypt or the Egyptians at this kind of point of their era. And so this kind of part bird, part woman concept might have been inspired by the Ba birds of ancient Egypt lore, but who knows? Over time, there are more and more descriptions added to the siren, some being there is the head of a woman and a large bird-like creature with feathers and scaly feet. Later on, they evolved yet again to having the bodies of the women with bird legs and with or without wings. Sometimes they didn't have wings. They usually talked about having some kind of musical instrument. They liked the lyre, Cathala, and Arlos. Man, I do not know my Greek, but various various musical instruments have been associated with them because, again, they love to sing, and that is how they entrap people. Is their voice is so enchanting, their song is so enchanting that people who listen to it, typically men, the sailors who sail by their cliffy shores, go crazy, jump off their ships, swim up to the swim through the rocky waters, and usually cause themselves to drown. Fun stuff. By the 10th century, the form of the sirens evolved yet again, this time in a sort of reverse fashion where the upper part was the bird, the lower part was a woman, and even around that time also there's a counter description of the fact that sirens were just little birds with women faces. Now originally, sirens were both male and female depicted in art, and by the 5th century the male-faced sirens kind of were stopped, eliminated, they disappeared. So sirens, as people usually think about now, are all female, even though that wasn't originally the case. In the classical era, again, sirens were parallel or thought of as mermaids or some kind of merfolk, people of Triton, daughters of Triton's people, which is one of the sea gods. So they kind of blended that way and became almost part fish, and they dropped the whole bird-like personalities and personas and attributes and physical characteristics. In Ovid's, well, actually, let me pause there. But as you can see, sirens, just as a entity, evolved from being just a terrifying concept of these creatures that lure sailors off their ships through voice, but had no physical descriptions, and then evolved wildly in the physical descriptions throughout time. Now, there are various stories of sirens in Greek myth. Obviously, the first one, like I mentioned multiple times, is Odysseus and the Odyssey, but Ovid also wrote about them, saying that they were potentially Persephone's companions, and that her mother, Demeter, the goddess of the earth and the fields and all things that grow, that Demeter actually gave them wings to help her search when Persephone, her daughter, was abducted by Hades the first time. And so they ended up helping Demeter track down where Persephone went. Other stories kind of reference them, one saying that at one point the goddess Hera convinces the sirens to have pretty much a sing-off with the muses. Now the muses win, and in a very Grecian fashion, they essentially torment and insult the sirens by pulling off all their feathers and embarrassing them completely, where the sirens essentially fall to the earth and transform into islands because they're so mortified. Now, the fact that the sirens have popped up in lots of myths. You have stories from Jason and the Argonauts. They appear there, where Jason's way to escape from hearing the siren song is the fact that he, on his ship, had one of the best musicians, actually I think the best musician in all Greek myth, Orpheus, play music so loud that everybody could only hear his music and did not hear the sound or the song of the sirens, with the exception of one particular sailor who had exceptional hearing, and he did dive off the boat, but I think he was saved by the goddess Aphrodite, if I remember correctly. Sirens have also, just one last little note, I know this one's actually running long today, have been associated as a psychopomp creature, so essentially a guides of the dead, and so certain texts that pertain to death and the afterlife will mention or have mentioned or depict sirens helping the souls find their afterlife. So interesting particular bit of mythology is the siren, because for me, I mean, when I originally hear the word siren, I think of these women who sing, who lure men off their boats. But there's so much more. And there's so much more mythos that around the siren that I'm not going to get to today because I am running very long. But check it out. If you have any questions for me about this or anything else, post them in the comments below or message me on any of my social media. And until next time, Skull.